Hello everybody, welcome to Bitcoin Not Crypto. My name's Forrest Stevens. In today's video, I'm going to be getting in why I think Bitcoin is going up from 100,000. A lot of people think this is some psychological level. We've seen a little bit of resistance here and that this is the end. This is the end of the bull market. A bunch of alts have ripped and we're going down from here. And I'm going to list off all the catalysts coming into 2026. We're almost in 2026. So I'm going to be talking about all the different reasons why I think Bitcoin is going up in 2026 and why I think the bull run has just begun. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is just based on my positioning personally. And this is supposed to be just for entertainment and general education so that you can do what you want with the information based on your own needs, right? Financial advisors, they should be tailored directly to you as an investor. Your investments are very personal, and I don't think that you should be copying anybody else because you don't know what my goals are compared to your own goals. So you need to understand your goals to understand your investments. And I don't understand your goals because I don't know who you are. I'm just talking to a camera right now. That being said, if you do want to get some Bitcoin, the best way to do it, in my opinion, and where I buy all of my Bitcoin is at the Bitcoin Well. They're a non-custodial exchange, which means they never hold your Bitcoin for you. You send them money, they send you Bitcoin, and they do so at the lowest spread. And they do that with no fees as well. And they're available in Canada and the United States. You can actually get yourself some free Bitcoin from using my link, which is in the description, and my code Bitcoin Not Crypto. And they also have non-KYC options available, and they're traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange Ventures. So check them out, link in the description. My first point of why I think the bull run is, the bull run started, right? The bull run has been going actually for a little while now. There's been periods of the bull moving quickly and the bull moving sideways, crab markets, and people are saying, oh, this is a bear market or whatever, but really it's just trading sideways and down, which is typical for Bitcoin a lot of times. And then it'll go into phases of high movement and then grinding upwards, and then it'll go sideways and down and then high movement. And this is typical of the cycles of Bitcoin until it reverses into a bear market, which happens as well. So if you're new to Bitcoin, there's these 4-year cycles, which they time up with the halving, which is the issuance of new Bitcoin getting halved. So right now we're at 3.25 Bitcoin being released every 10 minutes. And last year we were at 6.5. The other thing this times up with is the US election, which also times up with basically cyclical global money being created. And Bitcoin is the ultimate hedge against monetary debasement. So it actually tracks global liquidity quite a bit. There's people out there who are undereducated on Bitcoin, and they treat Bitcoin like a tech play. They treat it like NASDAQ, an accelerated NASDAQ or a pre-front run NASDAQ. But you can see there's actually quite a lot of divergence. It does track NASDAQ occasionally, and then there's moments of divergence. And those moments of divergence are typically to the upside. So Bitcoin has been a much better play than just holding NASDAQ or a leveraged NASDAQ even. So if we understand this 4-year cycle, and we look at where we are right now, in these cycles, if we put them back 4 years, we see that the year 2025 was basically historically going to end up being, if we only look at historical data, was going to be ending up being a good year, which it has been. In 2026, if we only look at historic data, again, is going to be an even better year. This is the year of the cycle, the year after the halving, that things go parabolic, and then there's a top. So I think the top is supposed to, if only historical, and there's obviously a range because the cycles have been shifting in time as well. So it's supposed to be somewhere around like October of next year or something like that. I would not try to time the markets in this way of, okay, we're only going to go off this historical data because there are a lot of changes. There's a lot of changes each cycle. And that's why I think the timing of these cycles change, is because things have happened. So last cycle, we had the beginning of corporate adoption, of nation state adoption, and of smart, intelligent investor adoption. And during this time, we went into a bear market, we've went into a bull market again, we've recovered, we hit our all-time high, even against inflation. We've gone beyond that. We've hit this psychological level of 100,000. So looking back at these prior cycle kind of moments, right? One of them being MicroStrategy, the other being intelligent investors that have bought in the last cycle. We see that. And another thing here that's really important is El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin. I'm actually planning to make a film about this. I think it's so important. The reason it's important is this is a case study. This is a nation that had nothing to lose by doing this. It took a huge leap and it has paid off. So they are an example of a success story for nation adoption of Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, of holding some Bitcoin on the nation's balance sheet. And people think, oh, well, El Salvador is such a small country, their GDP is smaller than some of these, other companies, right? All this stuff, like it's only, not that many people live there, all this kind of stuff, right? And yes, all of that is true, but none of it negates the fact that it worked and that it can be replicated and that it is a simple process and you can do it depending on your scale, right? Risk is always defined by position size. And I'll get into another position size argument for the bull run and why we're going higher than 100,000 as well. But El Salvador was the guinea pig. It was the person on the front lines. And it said, hey, you know what? The weather's nice out here. There's no enemies. We're actually doing quite well. They're the people on the Mayflower. They're the people that, forged through the west of America and settled. They are the ones who took a risk and they have been handsomely rewarded because they front ran everyone else, that all the other nations at least. And now we see more established nations and they will do so this is all speculative, right? And of course, everything I'm talking about here is speculative because I'm talking about 2026. It's not even happened yet. Because of the success of El Salvador, other nations will begin to adopt Bitcoin. If this happens, the price will run up like crazy. There will be some front running of this. Maybe that's already part of why the prices run up so much right now. It ran up after Trump got elected and he made a promise of at least creating a stockpile from the Bitcoin that they stole. So, maybe it's been being front run, but I think the buy pressure will outweigh the sell pressure of people just doing a speculative trade on news and events. Another point here that I have is people still don't have a good understanding of what Bitcoin is. When I first started learning about Bitcoin, I think it was 2016. I'd heard about it in 2012 and just thought, oh, it's some kind of internet money kind of thing. Oh, cool. It seems sweet. Maybe it'll go up in value, whatever. 2016, I actually had to sit down and understand, okay, what is a blockchain? What does a blockchain do? What is Ethereum? What is all the ICOs happening? What is all of this? And I had to actually understand what any of this is. Now, at the time, I had no money. I was starting a new business and all of my money was going into my business. I thought that was a greater return on investment than holding anything else. That was wrong, but I've been doing okay. And I relearned. So what I had to do was I thought I had an understanding of it. I remember telling people, it's digital gold. It has all these other, it doesn't do smart contracts. It's a little bit slower. Maybe there'll be changes to the consensus mechanism or to the blockchain idea of it. And maybe these other coins and cryptos will improve on it. So maybe Bitcoin isn't as valuable as maybe one of these other ones that you could bet on. I had to relearn, right? So there's learning in 2012, there's learning in 2016, and then there was learning in 2020 when I came into some money and I had to relearn what all of this was because I started learning about investing in general. And I think the reason that I'm telling you this whole story is that people are going on this journey right now. I went on it in 2020. I started learning more about this. I started learning about FTX. I started learning about REITs, investing, inflation. I started just looking up, okay, what are good investments to outpace inflation? What investments do well because of inflation, of monetary debasement? And Bitcoin just kept popping up on that list. And then I started researching it more. I listened to the Sailor series. That was huge for me, listening to the Sailor series and understanding starting to get an idea of what money is even. And because it was something that I was wanting to not lose, because I had gotten some money for the first real amount of money in my life. So I think that this is happening to people. They're starting to understand inflation is becoming more and more obvious in a lot of places in the world. And people are starting to ask, how can I outpace inflation? And that's why there's these huge valuations on all these stocks, right? The stock market's never looked so expensive before. And it's because what else are people going to do? People have started to understand that bonds aren't going to outpace inflation, that real estate has a lot of headache, right? There's going to be people moving out of these other assets, even a percentage of it, into Bitcoin because they start to realize, well, this has historically outpaced inflation. So there's that. Another part here is that comes back to risk management is BlackRock has advised a 2% allocation to Bitcoin. Now, what a 2% allocation to Bitcoin is it's something that any portfolio could lose and it wouldn't be the end of the world. And if it did really well, it would help everything else overperform. So it is, Sailor says that it's flood insurance. Nobody gets rich from flood insurance. That dude's all in. He's a Bitcoin maxi to the 10th degree. So that's all good, but 2% of these people's allocation, this is because of risk management. This is because they want exposure to it, but they don't understand it. They think it's risky, and they just know that a good way to have risk management is to manage position size. And this is how they would do it. They would allocate a small amount to it. This is just the start. And I think that a lot of this is going to be happening into 2026. And again, this is going to be a lot of the buying pressure that will up the price of Bitcoin. So another thing I mentioned off the top there, MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is a huge buyer of Bitcoin, and they are taking money from other places. So the convertible bond market, these bonds are being issued, they're being sold, and convertible ARB desks are buying them, insurance companies are buying them, institutions are buying them that are obligated to be invested in the convertible bond market. They are funding Bitcoin being taken off the exchange because when MicroStrategy gets the money from issuing these convertible bonds, they buy Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin is indefinitely removed from the supply. And when Bitcoin is removed from the supply, it means there's less sellers out there, which means there's more ability for the price to move up into new areas where there'll be new sellers. Another interesting idea that I've stumbled upon is that there's a lot of money creation, right? A lot of banks will hold the custody of these convertible bonds as basically capital, as an asset, and they will hold them on behalf of other companies that buy them, and they'll pay a rate. Like the company will pay a rate, basically a loan. They'll buy these debts, these convertible debts on loan from banks, and the banks will custody them. And those banks are giving the money to these ARB desks or institutions that want these convertible bonds, and they are printing that money out of thin air. So this is kind of the first time that money is being created to buy Bitcoin. Now, this is going to happen at a global level as well, and at a nation level, but this is already happening in the corporate level. Money is being created out of thin air. You know, the money printer is printing to buy Bitcoin, and it's through MicroStrategy, which is very interesting. So, and with that, you know, all of us that believe in Bitcoin, we want to hold Bitcoin because of the money printer. And now MicroStrategy is creating more money being printed. So that's going to drive price up because we can see more debasement happening. And it's just this runaway train. Like everybody, there's a lot of people out there that think what MicroStrategy is doing is a Ponzi, but he's just taking advantage of the Ponzi that is happening, which is fiat currency. Another thing I've touched on here multiple times, strategic Bitcoin reserve. If any of this happens to any degree, this will be huge for Bitcoin's price because there will be a huge amount of supply taken off and a huge amount of buying pressure. Now, I think that this will happen. There's been legislation bills put in for Pennsylvania, for Texas on the state level. Vancouver just passed a notion to make Vancouver a Bitcoin-friendly city. They're not putting Bitcoin on their treasury just yet, but the bill is to study it and to implement it in some ways to whichever sees fit. This probably will end up being that they put it on their balance sheet. There's multiple nations that have started mining it. There's multiple nations that have kind of started opening up back doors into it, and they have a lot of control over the private sector, so they're kind of gaining exposure to it. And then, of course, the big kahuna, America, is, you know, the president-elect has decided that a strategic stockpile is what they want to do, and we will see if that happens, but I think it would be highly likely that it will. That'll be money creation, a lot of it, to acquire it. They might have some other ways to acquire the Bitcoin as well, but I think a lot of that will be money creation, which just makes the debt worse, which makes a Bitcoin an even better investment. Global liquidity is going up. Here in Canada, the Canadian government just took out a massive loan through the Bank of Canada, which means basically they're issuing a ton more debt. Canada has been in a recession here for a while, and it just hasn't really been said. And the only reason that like our metrics aren't terrible is because of the huge amount of immigration that we have, but the metrics, the data look terrible if you actually look at the per family or per person basis. So as a nation, it doesn't look so bad, but that's only because there's been a huge amount of spending, because there's a lot of people that need homes and food and gas and cars, and all of this stimulus has happened because people are moving to this country. So with that is a huge amount of stimulus, a huge amount of quantitative easing that is happening behind the scenes. Japan as well is starting to do this. America is going to start to do this, or already has. They did a bunch of QT, and now they're going into QE. There's a lot of nations out there that are the debt is getting out of hand, and it's just they need growth. So that's another reason that like it makes sense for them to buy Bitcoin is a growth engine. They can buy Bitcoin, and basically just being early to the adoption curve allows it to grow. And it's such a pristine capital that they can use that and leverage it in some way. It just makes sense that all these nations are going to want to outgrow the problems that they have, right? GDP is super important. Growth in a nation is super important, and Bitcoin has historically grown like crazy. So they all want a piece of this growth engine, in my opinion. Another reason I think it's going up is Bitcoin is a Veblen good, and a Veblen good means that it actually gets more valuable the more price goes up on it. So an example of this can be certain like Rolexes and watches and jewelry and things like this. The more expensive it is, the more valuable it is. The price is actually tied into how people think of it. And this also ties into basically how volatility is decreasing over time historically in Bitcoin, and how more people are valuing it, and that's why the price has gone up. and this makes it seem like a safer thing. So the Veblen good is part of it, but part of it is just that because the price has gone up, because other institutions have created these products like iBit and Fidelity and all these things, and MicroStrategy has this underlying kind of put that they're just buying so much Bitcoin, and they're raising the floor, and corporate adoption is happening all over the place, and all these nation states are getting in. All of that is producing a feeling of safety around owning this asset. And the finance markets are all dictated by fear and greed, and in fear is the want for safety. And Bitcoin is starting to look safer and safer to an industry that really values safety. Another thing here is that the appetite for outsized returns has become normal. Nvidia skyrocketing, people were jumping on that train. All of these companies being kind of priced higher than they've ever been compared to their earnings. People are wanting to get some return for their investment now. The investing landscape has shifted a little bit. I've talked about how they want safety, but the risk curve is moving out. Yes, there's still a huge cohort that wants safety, but even them, they're willing to put a little bit more risky stuff in their portfolio because they want the returns that everybody else is getting. So this just incentivizes people as the risk curve goes out, as they start moving, to look into Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is at that sweet spot. It's gotten institutional adoption. It's not this crypto degen stuff. It's not meme coins. And people can say, kind of wrap it up in this idea of digital gold or, emerging technology and nation state, there's a limited supply. Like there's some really basic things that you can tell people to make them understand that why this might be a good long-term investment. And I think that the insane varying degree of knowledge on Bitcoin is just an interesting idea to think about, how everybody has some idea and understanding of Bitcoin, but it's so varied by individual. Another thing here is just that I've mentioned multiple times is the debt, right? All these nations that we are all a part of out there, their debt is out of control. They're taking out credit cards to pay credit cards. They're operating a Ponzi, a giant Ponzi, and it's becoming more and more apparent. 35 or 36 trillion, it might be even 36 at this point, $1 trillion in debt for America. They've exported a lot of their debt all over the world. There's people holding it, there's institutions holding it, there's nations holding it. And they're just saying, well, why are we holding this debt at such bad interest rates? They keep creating new debt to pay their old debt. It's gotten to these numbers where people are starting to think, hey, this is really starting to look unsustainable. Let's diversify. There's a lot of central banks out there that held US treasuries because they felt like they're kind of as good as they can get for something very stable. There's a lot of central banks that have started to allow those to kind of come due. They've sold off a little bit of them, maybe even, and they're diversifying. And of course, they're going to diversify into things like gold. And I think that a lot of them will start looking at Bitcoin, right? That's digital gold, baby. Let's get some of that digital gold. And I think it makes a lot of sense. If I was, obviously I'm a Bitcoin maxi, but if just looking at it even subjectively or from the outside, it just doesn't make any sense that they wouldn't at least allocate some percentage, even if it's really small, to Bitcoin. Because what if, right? What if it becomes super important to have Bitcoin to transact globally? Or what if the price runs up so much that it outperforms all these other assets and I didn't have any and all of my other assets have gone down in value priced in Bitcoin, right? What if? It just becomes a big what if, and it becomes more risky not to have it than to have it. I think another thing that we're seeing here is critical mass for the network effect. Bitcoin is a network, and it's a network of people. It's a network of people that believe in it, that understand it, that share it, that talk about it. And I think that like the network effect kind of spiral, and it's especially spirals in a bull market, because you want to say, hey, look at this price, look at how much money I've made, look at, you know, these gains, isn't that crazy? Like, look at this thing. And then, you know, there's a lot of education out there now. If the network effect was way smaller when the amount of people were smaller, but there was also less resources. In 2012, I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't even know what to look up. There wasn't the YouTube videos, there weren't the podcasts, there weren't the books. It was a lot more niche and a lot more difficult to get information on. It wasn't impossible, but now it's a lot easier. And I think that ease plus the size of the network effect have hit a critical mass that will potentially prolong this bull market, or potentially see higher elevation of the bull market. And I think that hopefully a lot of people stick around, and then that mutes the bear market. That's kind of what I'm seeing in the potential future for Bitcoin. I think another interesting point here, and the one that I'll end up on here, is that crypto scams have become more transparent. The big crypto scams that were coming out in 2016 were ICOs. People thought, okay, well, this is kind of a way to invest in, like, this is like an IPO, initial public offering, but I buy this token instead and I trade my Bitcoin for it. I'll get rid of my Bitcoin for some ETH, and then I'll trade this ETH for Fartcoin, or I mean, Fartcoin's the one now actually. And that's what I'll get into, but I'll trade it for whatever, just some debunked ICO, right? And then in 2020, we had NFTs. NFTs started popping off like crazy, and people were saying, well, this has value, this will have value because it's collectible and because it's digital art, and there's only one of them, it's non-fungible. These aren't the same. This isn't just a JPEG screenshot. And there's all this deception. Now we have, what we have now in the crypto realm is meme coins, Fartcoin, Dogecoin, Shiba Inu, Hawk Coin, right? Hawk Tua, right? These things have no value. They don't pretend to have value. If they do pretend to have value, they say, well, this is such a good community. We're building a community for the long term. And some people might get tricked by that, but how transparent is that? It's super transparent of a scam, right? The only people that got tricked, well, I shouldn't say the only people, but the majority of the people that got tricked by Hawk Tua's scam coin was people that had no idea about cryptocurrency. And those people are getting fewer and fewer. Yeah, there's a sucker born every minute, but now it's more like every minute and 10 seconds, because people are starting to become aware of crypto and Bitcoin and all of this, and they'll just start to realize, well, maybe I'll gamble on this thing, but that's all it is. It's just a degenerate gambling ecosystem. And it's pretty transparent now that that's what it is. Now, there is a bit of a resurgence, I will say, with this, where for utility coins, XRP had this big run up. They're pretending they're a utility coin, although nobody uses them, nobody will use them, and they have no use case really. And I think that it's just it's a lot more transparent in this world right now that we're living in. And I think overall, this is a good thing, because it allows people to, like, people should be able to trade in these things. We should have a free market, but we should know what they are. There's many other things I'm missing here about why 2026 will be good for Bitcoin. And I want you to comment them in the comment section if you have any other things that you think would be good for it. I do plan to make a bear case for Bitcoin, a video eventually. I've said that in the past already. And yeah, if there's anything I've missed, if there's anything that I talked about that I wasn't fully clear on that you have questions about, ask me those in the comment section as well. And check out Bitcoin Well if you want to buy some Bitcoin and front run the United States. All right, we'll see you on the next one.